On the fly, man. On the fly. I'm President of Gallant. That's my buddy Alan Gallant. We're going to do a Dark Shadows video. We will do 12 Angry Men tomorrow night with Patrick. He could not make it. So we're going to do impromptu Dark Shadows video. Who, if you had to list a top 3 of underrated characters, who would it be, Alan?
Let me see. I would say Tom Jennings, because he was not a long-term character, although he was certainly an extremely interesting vampire. But yeah, he would be underrated. Chris, of course, that character was long-term, so everybody enjoyed that character much more, I think, and had a chance to. So there's that, and let's see. Underrated character. I think in terms of Charles Delaware Tate, because he was played by, an actor that not everybody likes, but B, he served as the sort of catalyst through which Petofi was able to accomplish certain things, like the control of Quentin through the portrait and all of that sort of thing. So he was an interesting character in that respect, I thought, and somewhat underrated as in terms of what his importance was to the actual overall storyline in 1897. Number 3. Early storyline. I would say that because it was early storyline, and because his involvement was cut somewhat short, I would say that it would be Dr. Guthrie. Extremely influential in the short time he was on the show. He was one of those characters where you thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if he just became a permanent cast member, like a secondary sort of Stokes, Professor Stokes kind of character, because I mean Stokes kind of was inspired by Guthrie, I think, in terms of what the writers ended up doing with him. And John Lascelles just died here a week ago at 95. Rest his. He was one of the, if not the oldest remaining cast member at 95. So.
What's interesting too, his character gets mentioned at 159 and debuts the next episode, and he's only going to be there for 25 episodes.
Right.
And it's like crazy.
It's a pretty wild ride when he's there, because it starts to open up all sorts of things in terms of the revelation of what Laura is and all of that sort of thing. So, and I think that probably, contributed to the rise in ratings as that was happening, because then people started to get interested in what's going to happen with this character. Is she going to get found out? Is she going to get thwarted, or is she going to, rule the day? What's going to happen here? And, Guthrie's demise is part of keeping that tension of what's going to happen next. So, I mean, it was justified, but at the same time, would have loved to have seen that character develop further.
Yeah, I think that's there are two big shocks. Guthries' death, like you just said, and what were they going to do after that? Because it's like, how are they going to stop this woman?
Right. Exactly. And that's why it was justified, because it heightened the tension of that whole thing. But, as a writer, when you're writing that sort of thing, you want to be able to pique the audience's interest and keep their kind of anxiety going about, and have them care about what happens to these characters. So,
yeah.
Actually, one of the first episode I have a memory of is, I think it's episode 172, which is the episode in which it's right after Guthrie holds the seance, and there's a tape recording of the seance, but it's wiped out and there's nothing left on the tape except the crackling of a fire.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that, and I didn't really follow the show until after, some kids at my school mentioned there was a vampire on it. But that was my first memory of the show. Was that was in February of '67, I think. So it was not too long before the intro of Barnabas.
Yeah, and he's the one. He conducts the first seance at Collinwood, officially. And that's why it was so cool. It's like, you're not expecting a seance, even though they talk about it. Then it happens, right. And then the tape recording, it's like, you hear the fire crack, which is a nice effect.
Yeah,
nice
it was
job.
nice. And obviously, who's responsible for it when you hear that, too, because, it's Laura's a Phoenix. And we already sort of know what her powers with fire are at that point. It's Guthrie's little foray on the show sort of started. It introduced a lot of the supernatural sort of elements that would become normal operating procedure in later storylines, and the seance being one of the big ones.
Yeah, I think there's two you get, because the first official ghost scene is where Victoria Winters is alone at Collinwood, and she's in the drawing room and she sees a ghost at the drawing room door.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know who it is. You just see a figure. You know? And she even says, I'm not sure if it was a ghost or not. But by the time Guthrie rolls around, she has seen and interacted with Josette.
Yes.
And she tells him, I'm not an imaginative person. I've seen a ghost.
Right. She's willing to believe something is afoot in that respect.
It's like, good for you, Vicky. It's a
really. I mean, it's weird too. Early Vicky is really underrated too, because she was actually kind of quite the little detective at the beginning of it. She was running around asking questions. She wasn't going, I don't understand all the time. She was trying to figure things out. And she and the Gardner boys kind of worked together there a few times trying to figure things out, particularly, during the bleeder valve thing, and then again during the early part of the Laura storyline. So she was much more active participant in the mysteries in the early days.
I'll give you a couple. Frank Gardner I always felt was very underrated. Because he actually is the one who mentions Guthrie too.
Yep.
I love his reaction when he realizes that Guthrie's going to dig up a grave.
What?
Yeah. Joe Haskell's reaction is like, you want me to what now?
Yeah. But they come around. Obviously, they have to in order to further the story. But and that's also the first super spook-soaked scene in the series. The ghost stuff is pretty spooky, but going into that graveyard, into that mausoleum, and cracking open that her Laura Stockbridge Collins mausoleum, that's really spooky stuff. And they've got the caretakers there and everything else. So it's very atmospheric. I consider that one of the highlights of the early episodes.
Yeah, there's some interesting Josette ghost appearances. Not just we know about the portrait, but then there's the one where she appears to Victoria when she's trapped behind the bookshelf because Matthew Morgan's got her tied up. And then there's the one where she's in Laura's cottage and she's reaching for David. It's very cool how they just make her appear.
Yeah. Once they got going with the special effects, they started playing around with it and trying to perfect it. And in black and white, it really seemed to work really well, having her come out of walls and portraits and things like that, because they were able to do it with a lot of black drapes and so on, like that behind her. Hold on a second.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, what's really interesting too is with Josette, it's like when you see it really looks so, like you said, it looks really cool in black and white. And even when they when Dark Shadows goes to color and they pull off like the ghost there, it's like, okay, the ghost of Sarah is creepy because it looks like a living person almost.
Right. And it's a little girl too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. There's a different element, sort of spookiness to that.
Yeah.
And also, the way the writers wrote her, she knew things, but yet she didn't know things. It was like she was wandering through another dimension, and she sort of instinctively knew things, but she couldn't talk about it because she didn't know it on that level. It was a clever way of doing it, I thought, to keep that mystery going with her.
Yeah. And when they have her just come into the old house to confront Barnabas too, it's like, oh shit.
Oh yeah, and they actually have her disappear at the end of that. Yeah. You see her disappear rather than just have her go off camera. That's the first and only time they did that with her.
Yeah. What's
I have a dog that acts like a cat. He goes in and out of rooms.
my cat's here. My cat here is on the floor. But what's creepiest to you? Like, is it like a fictional ghost disappearing, or is it a person who's a flesh and blood human being who just disappears?
That's probably creepier. Also, things that happen to flesh and blood human beings. When I was a kid, that would scare me the worst. Yeah. Like when Evan Hanley was attacked by the Hand and all of that sort of thing. That scared me seriously when I saw that as a 9-year-old. That was just crazy. So there was something. It was more immediate. It was like, that could happen to me, when I was a kid. So yeah, I would say the things that happen to human beings more so than the sort of machinations of ghosts and so on.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting Evan Hanley his face to be mangled.
Yeah. That was a whole lot of latex and a ping pong ball, but it was very effective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, even Chris Jennings was scarier because he's a normal person most of the time until he sprouts hair and fangs, and so again, that's something that's happening to ostensibly a normal person. Whereas with Barnabas, he has a curse and he's the vampire and so on, but he has human aspects. So I kind of identified with him as somebody that was struggling with something, and as a kid, you all struggle with things, socializing and so on. So I identified more with that. Some of these other happenings were a little scarier because they were a little closer to home.
Yeah. What about the Leviathan Arc shocked you the most? Because there's a lot of shocking things happening.
Yeah. The thing that shocked me the most, I think, was the thing that ended up forcing the writers to change the direction of it, and that was how cold Barnabas became. Yeah. After being so fully wrapped up in, protecting the family and saving the kid and doing all of those things, even as a vampire, he never lost sight of his goal that way. In 1897, he comes back to 1970 or late 69, I guess it was actually. And he's just like drained of all this empathy. It's not there, which I'm sure was fun for him to play. And it was interesting, but it was also, I think, the thing that kind of PO'd people about that storyline. They didn't want to see him like that.
I think it made the character a little more interesting, though, too, coming back. And like, they set it up good enough to, like, in my opinion, when you watch the Leviathan appear and they cause him, they like overpower him, and he's still a vampire at that point. It made you understood, okay, once he came back, it's like, okay, he's definitely working for those people.
Yeah.
And so
he's under control, basically.
Yeah. Right. In my opinion, I don't feel the writers needed to explain much of his evilness because his evilness is forced by the Leviathans.
It's correct. It was. But I think the thing that forced the writers to change directions was really fan response to it, because at the time there was a lot of write-in response. They didn't like it. They didn't, they were uncomfortable with him like that, and of course that's going to affect the ratings. And practically, that's why they would change it, which is why they had the episode where Audrey the Leviathan vampire girl happens, and they threaten him because he's having doubts, and sort of changes it back. And I mean, that was going to have to happen eventually anyway. I think you weren't going to keep him under the control of him. It just happened a little faster, I think.
Yeah, I did like the fact that they added a weakness of the werewolf. That was cool.
Yeah, because you can't have a supervillain that's totally invulnerable. Otherwise there's no way to defeat him, or combat him in any way, and you don't have a chance. So yeah, they have to have that drama of, he can't, if he drowns, he's done for. If he gets attacked by a werewolf, he's done for. So he has a couple of things that scare him as well.
Yeah. And I think Chris Penn did a really good job portraying that fear too of the werewolf. Really, really underrated actor who got to play this massive heel. Was really fun to watch.
Really, yes. I think it's only been in more recent years that people have come to appreciate Chris Pennock's roles more, and a lot of that has to do with the fact of how accessible he was to fans. I think. I mean that kind of that people would then go back and say, well, let's look at this again. See what he's doing.
Yeah.
Even his turn as Sebastian Shaw, which nobody talks about, I enjoyed that as well. The hippie astrologer guy. I enjoyed that as well. But it was, I mean, and Gabriel was a tour de force.
Oh yeah.
1840 Gabriel was just, amazing character. He really had it. But that was the thing about Chris Pennock that. Some people thought that he was a little overwrought in the way he acted, but in fact, he was doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing with those characters.
Yeah.
Exactly what he was supposed to be doing with them. And I thought he committed to that. And his commitment to that was admirable from an actor's point of view. I can see what he's, as an adult now with experience, I can see what he was trying to do. Even, he was only, 24, 25, I guess, when he came on the show. So he was pretty young.
Yeah.
But he was committed to doing what, the directors were asking him to do, and be this sort of energetic, dynamic character that was going to help propel the show.
I'll give you another too. Well, Chris Pennock did play different versions of Gabriel. 1841 Gabriel is interesting. Parallel Time Gabriel is real interesting. He is. Like, he's not in a wheelchair like the other Gabriel was, which that Gabriel's very, very fun too.
Oh, absolutely. And they're both kind of connivers,
Yeah.
They're very, very much in the role of a sort of like, it's like this he's a combination of a sort of a melodrama villain and like Fredo from The Godfather. He's the son that nobody appreciates. And, and so he gets mad and he connives and tries to find his own way.
He's got the best liquors, hidden spots in all the house. Like, of
course.
But more another Keith Prentice's Morgan Collins. I always loved how he did that. Like,
he didn't get an awful lot of time to establish himself because that was the last few months of the series. But he. I don't know how comfortable he was with some of the over-the-top stuff that he was asked to do, because he was pretty much he was a straightforward kind of guy in terms of acting, but he pulled it off okay, I thought, and he certainly pulled off the whole glowering hatred of his Bramwell and all that sort of thing, which, because there's this love triangle going on, so that part of it was, and that was a shift back to a sort of a classical story of like what soap operas normally are like, which is a romantic sort of story with these romantic conflicts, and all of that sort of thing. So, and apparently the ratings went up. So they must have all been doing a fairly good job, because they started to go back up again. So
I think when he's going in between Morgan and then goes to Jim's Foresight,
so yeah,
really, really impressive work he's doing there.
Yeah, that's good transformative stuff. That's, any actor loves to be able to do that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, can I play the other side of the character, or a whole different character? Yeah, sure. That was one of the cool things. That's why everybody wanted to be on Dark Shadows, because you had these opportunities to do these wild things as an actor. So, I mean, word got around by, probably 1968, that show was like, if you were a soap opera actor or even a stage actor or whatever, if you can get on that show, you have a good time. Work hard, but you're going to have a good time.
Absolutely. I've talked about this, that Laura Parker was only 28 years old when she did Angelique.
She was, but she also had she was also she was very much an adult. She had 2 children.
Yeah.
Had been married for some time. Her husband, her first husband, Tom, is still alive. He's in his early 90s.
Yeah.
He ended up going. He ended up in California as well. I guess they went up there before they got split, but. He ended up going into teaching academics as an artist. He taught art, yeah, as well as he did art too. There's a lot of art. His artwork is up there. He has a website.
What's some of your favorite set designs on DS?
Oh my God. I remember the first time I saw the old house.
Yeah.
And that was pretty brilliant, I thought. The way that the first time I saw it, it was still kind of trashed out a little bit. It wasn't completely restored and all that. It was before 1795, when it looked really perfect and pristine and everything. But it was great. And I didn't realize until many years later that staircase in the old house stops after about 5 or 6 steps. There's nothing there except there's a ladder on the other side of it, and they had to go down the ladder and sneak off the set. So the
staircase to nowhere.
The staircase to nowhere, and but that's a great set. Another great set that I really enjoyed was the cottage, because they used that so many different time periods, and they'd switch around a few things and so on. And later on, I started realizing that Cy Tomashoff was doing some pretty clever things with the unit sets, because he would reuse pieces of them in other sets in order to save, time and money both. So he would take like Dr. Lang's, the entryway to Dr. Lang's house, and that in the receiving room, that became part of Nicholas Blair's house. Yeah. And so and they just added a different door and a little fancier entryway and stuff like that. But the bulk of that set was out of the Dr. Lang set. So that was pretty cool, I thought. They used, they built a set for that Seaview house that Vicky and Bert never ended up living in, because he disappeared in South America, and they took that set and they ended up using it in 1795 and used parts of that for different settings, Trask's rooms, a couple other things that they used it for. So he was really clever about doing all that sort of thing. Of course, everybody loves the great house and the foyer and the drawing room and all that. That was truly the most permanent set. It never really went anywhere once it was up. The old house became almost permanent at one point. It never went anywhere.
For a show that was on a sound stage in a small studio, you have all these people in the Blue Whale on a set. You know what I mean? It looked good.
Yeah, it was one of the things that Tomashoff was really good at was forced perspective. He would design things with the lines that made it look longer, deeper, even with people on the set, so it didn't look as small as it was. And of course, the camera work to border it so that you had it basically. You saw the set, but there was a suggestion that it went way further on either side, that sort of thing. So they were very good at that.
When they had a bunch of people in the blue whale, I noticed like in the beginning episodes, they would shoot them up close and not like make you feel like, hey, this place is actually looks bigger than what it might be.
Right.
Which made sense.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's certain there were certain limitations that you had depending on how many sets you had built around it for that day's episodes too. Oh, this angle we won't be able to do today because if we do, we're going to see the mausoleum set on the other side of it, that kind of thing. But overall, they built those sets to facilitate a fairly wide range of scenes and scenarios for the actors. Originally, I mean, in the first few episodes of the Blue Whale, they had a whole bunch of people in there. You saw the room seemed huge in the way they shot it, and there were maybe 7 or 8 extras sitting around tables in those early episodes until Dan Curtis decided that was too expensive. We're not going to do that anymore. But they did that, and then eventually they kind of squeezed it in for most episodes, so you only saw maybe 1 table or 2 tables and maybe 1 person sitting there, and then the main actors that were going to be in the scene were sitting at one of the tables or at the bar. But they could expand that too. I mean, they could contract and expand it however they needed to do for that particular episode.
When we got the destruction of 1995. The destruction of Collinwood, the Cy Tomashoff gets to destroy his own creation in a sense.
Well, he actually layers destruction on top of the stuff so that he can move it back rather than destroy. Yeah. But yeah, it looks like it's destroyed, no doubt. Taking doors off the hinges, doing stuff like that, and having peat moss hanging from the ceilings, and that kind of stuff. He did a good job with that. I think he would have kept going with it, except the stagehands union told him, we're quitting, we're stopping. He worked him hard for a couple of days over a weekend, I guess, and they were like, we love the double golden time, but we can't do this anymore. I mean, we're done.
And we got a new set too, isn't that, where Carolyn was staying in that little cottage place.
The shack at Finley's Cove.
Yeah.
Yes, that was pretty cool. You're right. That was pretty much new. I think they may have used some pieces from other sets, but they did it cleverly, and you really couldn't recognize it very much. That was kind of a neat little thing to do, and also having new things in a new time is a great way of sort of disorienting a little bit. And and it makes sense because Barnabas and Julia are totally disoriented going into this and trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
So if you've got Collinwood in ruins, and then you've got this weird shack where Carolyn is living and she's kind of nutty, and there's a bunch of stuff from Collinwood that she's taken out of there and stashed in this shack. You get this sort of feeling of what's going on here. So
Patofe's lair was an interesting set design too.
Yeah, that was all that stonework that they had in there. I think that was probably some vacuum form.
Really?
Yeah, that they could make that stuff in sheets, and then you'd paint it to make it look realistic and so on. But you could make it in like poly sheets. So I think they may have been doing that. And vacuum form was definitely around back then. There's no doubt about that. I mean, they were making toys with vacuum form in the 60s. Mattel had a whole series of vacuum form molds and so on. My brother had one of those kits back in the mid 60s when I was a little boy. So yeah, that's different. It's interesting. They would do different things for different effects. The cave, the Barnabas's cave, I think they used some kind of a paper mache treatment, black paper mache, or it was painted, sprayed, to get that kind of rocky effect. But they had actually used that before. I think they must have saved it from the episode where they're looking for Adam at the bottom of Widow's Hill. It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's the same stone, that black craggy rock stuff. But I'm pretty sure that's probably just chicken wire and treated paper so that it would be fairly durable and could be moved around a little bit. So they did a lot of interesting things with the sets too. And of course, I've been off and on. I've been building sets for the last 40 years as well, or overseeing the building of sets. So I see a lot of that stuff. I see stuff that they did.
Cool.
Yeah, the cornice work in Collinwood.
Yeah.
That was probably made out of a material called homosote, which is not usually used anymore and has to be used under really strict conditions because when you cut it, it releases gas. And unless you're wearing a respirator, you're not supposed to do it. I've worked with the stuff before it was kind of not banned, but restricted. And it was a really good material. It was soft and it almost fluffy board material that you could carve brick effects into it and do all sorts of things like that. And then you could seal it. You seal it with something. And I think that's what they made those cornice stones out of, something similar to that. The actual, like a lot of the Collinwood woodwork was real wood. I mean, he really went all out with that set because it was designed to be a permanent set. So you had the baluster and the staircase and the paneling on the walls. That was probably all real wood. It probably was pine rather than hardwood, but
yeah,
that was still real wood. So,
nice.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. It's really cool stuff. So, but there's just a ton of that stuff. I loved that stuff when I was a kid. I didn't know anything about it back then, but it got me interested in it. So.
Did you think Rose Cottage was going to be bigger than what it was?
Well, I mean, it was just this little tiny model to begin with.
Yeah.
And the exterior shots was just a little tiny model. It was the same dollhouse, I think, that they used in the playroom, but they just turned it around and whatnot. But yeah, it was kind of tiny. It was definitely kind of tiny. And I think that was partially practical reasons. They had other bigger sets that they needed to deal with. So they didn't.
You know who made that place a joy was Joan Bennett, watching her new character in that. Was...
Flora. Yeah, Flora. Yeah, she was pretty funny. She was actually more extreme at first than she ended up. The first time she comes on, she was like, she was really high energy and crazy. They toned her down a little bit after a while, but yeah, she was pretty fun.
Yeah, she did not like seances. She didn't like headless things.
Like anything. She wrote these romance novels, and that's all. She didn't like to be out in the real world at all. Which in Collinsport, the real world was about seances and ghosts and stuff. So
it's crazy how both her sons, like the John Carlin's character Desmond.
Yes, Desmond.
Quentin, they're both obsessed with the occult. It's
yeah. Well, I mean, he's the one that brings the head back. So
yeah. Oh, my brother's dead. I can't give him this.
He's gonna keep it.
I'll keep it.
Yeah. He ostensibly brought it back for Quentin, and Quentin was kind of like, "No, you keep it. This is gross."
Well, that's the funny thing too, because when he comes back, he thinks Quentin's dead. Yeah. No one's found him and Tad yet, and then he's like, well, you know what? I'll just keep this head for myself. And I'm like,
right. Which is
why?
Yeah, because there's no explaining the head. I mean, anybody. Anyway.
I was messing around with the wife. I said, "Hun, what do you think about? I got you something like that." She just looked at me.
No, no.
Don't, yeah, don't
You
do
want this prop around the house? Come on, come on.
that. Who wouldn't want that beautiful looking? You know what? Never mind. That's what that would be too.
Yeah, I think Vinny Lascalzo may have made that one, or Dennis Eager, one of the two of the guys that was doing makeup. I think they probably used a wig block and then sort of sculpted it over it. So it was pretty good, though. I mean, it looked like Michael McGuire. Yeah,
it looked good.
Yeah, it was pretty spooky.
And the way they got to do the effect too, with the eyes opening and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
What is one of your favorite effects that doesn't get praised enough, you think?
I really, especially ever since I was a kid, I loved the bat gag. The bat in the window, you know, which was nothing more than two techs, and they had, you know, these strings, these tension strings on it inside of a hoop, and so they would just kind of shake it at the window, and all you saw was the bat because the hoop was big enough so that you didn't see it in the window. There's a picture of that in, I think it's in my scrapbook memories.
Cool.
Yeah. And that was kind of fun, and so I always loved the bat anyway. Not so much the Bill Baird bat. That one was a little awkward, although it was you know, it was kind of fun, but it was a bit more awkward. The small bat was the one I liked, the one where they would just have him floating around, or you know, or they would do the chroma key and have it like come in and attack somebody from off screen and that kind of thing. I liked that effect an awful lot. I thought that was really good. Simple effect.
Yeah. I love how they did the sound too. They always timed their sound really well.
Oh yeah, and that wasn't easy because they sometimes had to layer the sound upon sound because, well, my first podcast talks about this. You have music, and that's going to be going underneath almost every scene. Then you have the special effects sound, squeaking of the bat or whatever it happens to be. And then maybe you've got an additional sound of somebody, you know, tramping across leaves or something like that. Sometimes, you know, it was tricky at times to get all that in and get it timed correctly because they didn't have it all sort of like we do now. We can use digital.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't do that. I mean, the music for the first 3 years of the show, at least, maybe 4, was on those discs. So it was like playing a record. And then you had a Foley man who would do live effects like the bat squeak or something like that. And then you might have pre-recorded effects like the scream, some of the screams and some of the laughter and things like that were pre-recorded effects. So yeah, it was Sybil Weinberger had her hands full trying to orchestrate all that stuff and make sure her music was playing at the right time.
When I was watching in the 1841 parallel time arc, and you see the two bodies there, my nephew walked in. He's like, "Why are there two? Are those bodies real?" I said, "No, that's chroma key. They're not real." I had to explain to him
what that meant. Yeah.
What that meant. He's like, "You're old, Uncle Joe." I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm old. I'm in my 40s. I'm old. It's all downhill.
Damn near dead. I'm in my 60s. So
you stop that, young man. You stop that. But I'll tell you though too, the one effect too that I know Jonathan did not love the vampire fans. I love how he would talk and you could tell the fans were in, and he was so good at talking with them in.
Yeah, it was hard to talk with him in, but he was pretty good at it. He was better at it than most people. A lot of people, they just did an off-screen overdub of the dialogue while they were putting the fangs in so that it would cover. But occasionally he would actually have the fangs in and he'd be speaking on camera. So yeah, he articulated pretty well considering all the things are like right there. Give you a good lisp if you're not careful with them sticking out like that. Snaggletooth. But I love the fangs. I mean, I was fascinated by the whole vampire thing when I was a kid. So I loved it when the Fangs came out, whether it was him or Tom Jennings or, Dirk Wilkins made a pretty good vampire. That was pretty,
yeah.
any of those were all great as far as I was concerned. Angelique, of course, when she was a vampire, that was interesting. I think everybody like put their name in a hat and said, "Who gets to be a vampire?" And pull out names because a lot of people did end up getting to be a vampire on the show.
Roxanne was interesting, a mysterious vampire. They didn't reveal it right away, which was really, really interesting.
Yeah, and there was an element of dominance and submission with her and Sebastian Shaw.
Yeah,
that's when you realize she's a vampire. That's why. But before that, it's like she's like bossing him around and stuff. Wonder what kind of relationship this is, But yeah.
No, here's the thing. I was like, when I first watched, yes, I'm waiting for the S&M to break out. I'm like,
yeah,
are we
absolutely. I mean, she looked like she was definitely going to be the Dom.
Yeah.
She played.
Now we know better.
Especially after being, oh, help me, in regular time, and in parallel time, and then she shows up and she's like, "No, I'm not. Help me here."
Dark Shadows always did really good with that, with taking a character that played a baby face and, okay, you're going to play a character with a similar name, but this time you're going to be a heel.
Right. It's a nice variety, and it gives the actor something new to do, which I think is I think that was, I think a thought went into that in terms of what the writers were doing, because the writers knew these actors, after a while they got to know how to write for them. And so if maybe one of the actors was, doing well at something else and they're going to bring them back, hey, let's do something different with that person, because that might be fun for the audience and for the actor both. So yeah, absolutely. Actors love to play different various roles.
Chris Pennock as Sebastian Shaw was definitely really interesting. You could tell he really did have the gift of astronomy and seeing the future.
Yeah, that's one of the underrated characters, I think, for me anyway, because a lot of people just kind of blow him off because he wasn't. I mean, he was there enough, but it was a briefer role than, say, one of the Gabriels or John Yeager. Less, those kind of roles are much more impactful emotionally, I think, than Sebastian Shaw was. But I think he's underrated in terms of what his purpose was and how he accomplished it. So
we'll have to do a specific episode of Mr. Yeager here soon.
Oh, yeah. Yes. The Jekyll and Hyde thing.
Yeah.
Definitely. It was interesting. Yeah. I thought the smartest move they did with that was getting rid of that fake nose. They tried to use on the first couple episodes because it wasn't sticking to his face worth anything. It just didn't quite work. And he didn't need it. He had with the black wig and the mustache. That was enough. You could tell. And he was also acting up a storm. As Yeager, and being very, very different.
At first, because I wasn't sure what route they were taking with the scientific route. When I first watched DS, at first I thought they weren't going to say that he's transforming himself into a werewolf. And going that route, but I was pleasantly surprised with the Jekyll and Hyde stuff.
Yeah, they kind of went science fiction a little bit, but they mixed it with supernatural because they also had the whole thing with Angelique being alive because of Roxanne and all of that sort of thing. So they mixed the two together to keep things interesting. But the Jekyll and Hyde thing was totally science fiction, because he had the formula and all this sort of thing. So
the Alexis was Angelique's. Yeah, but also too, one of my favorite scenes in 1970 Parallel Time, when Jonathan Fritz Barnabas is looking at Angelique's portrait, he is show me the eyes. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I told my friend this. I said nobody is quite the shit disturber like Barnabas.
No, but I mean, he was on to parallel Angelique from the beginning.
Yeah, he was
totally on to her. Everybody else thought, oh, it's Alexis, the helpless one.
No.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, anytime you have Jonathan Fritz Barnabas look at her like, really? You don't think I know that's you? Yeah, I know it's you. I know it's you.
In any time period.
Yes.
You are still her.
Absolutely. All right, man. I'm out of questions. Is there anything you want to add before we go?
No, not really. This was interesting. I appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about Dark Shadows, as you well know.
Absolutely.
So we'll do this again sometime, but let's get together and do 12 Angry Men here.
Yeah. Tomorrow, guys, we're gonna cover 12 Angry Men. I'll message Patrick once I get this uploaded. Link to Alan Gallant's YouTube channel, Collins Sport After Dark, is going to be in the description box. That is a lovely hat, my friend.
Yeah.
God bless, man. Good night.
Take care, man.